Hello everyone, and welcome to today's review of Trials of Cold Steel, The Legend of Heroes. I'd like to start off by saying that the developer for this game was Falcom, and the publisher was Marvelous and Xseed. Now, I was a little hesitant about playing this game at first, because usually when I see Marvelous and Xseed together, that generally means we couldn't be bothered to actually do a dub for the game, so everything will be in Japanese and you'll have to read a lot. Thankfully, however, for this release, Falcom have decided to put a lot of effort into their English dub of the game, which really helps build on the characters and makes me care a lot more about them, because when I try to play the game and everything's in Japanese or I have to read everything all the time, I think it kind of takes away some of the character of them. But we'll get more into that later. Let's get on with the review. Trials of Cold Steel's story revolves around you, playing as a main character Reen Swartzer, as you attend Thor's military academy. During that time, you meet new team members, and as the story advances, you learn more about the world that the characters come from, and also have to solve a mystery which can only be described as a haunted house mystery. Yes, I know what you're thinking, this does sound a little bit like the anime series Ghost Stories, only just not as funny. As you advance in the game, you are then given tasks by your teacher. You go to areas and locations which, for some reason, you only really go to once. Once that area is done and that chapter is complete, you do not go back to that area again. So you have to do everything that you're going to do in that area, because you will not be seeing it again once that chapter is finished. The graphics for Trials of Cold Steel are good, but I will be honest, I was actually rather surprised when I found out this game was a PlayStation 3 game. Originally, when I first booted this game up and started playing it, I did think it was a lot like God Eater that had just been released on a PC. I actually thought that this was a PlayStation portable game. Not a PlayStation Vita, but a PSP game. I thought this was a PSP game that had had a graphic boost and had been ported to the PC. However, it turned out later on when I started playing it, it's actually a PlayStation 3 game. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, I'm just saying that while playing the game, I did notice certain things that when I'd look at textures, they'd look a bit grainy, and I noticed that there was never actually any circles in the game. What I mean by this is when I went to things like pots or plates or things and I actually had a look at them from above or at a certain angle, I noticed that none of them were circular. They're all squares made into the shape of a circle. I'll try finding a picture so I can take a screenshot and explain it better, but essentially I noticed that the game didn't really have many circles in it. The graphics are still very good. I do actually like the graphics in the game. I think they're very simple and very cartoony. I think they suit the anime theme quite well. However, with the graphics, I'm not exactly sure why everything is a square object and why there are no circles in the game. Maybe this is somehow a cost-cutting method so that the game could be produced on a much cheaper budget, or maybe it made the game easier to work with for the developers. It doesn't affect the game itself, if I'm being honest, and I only really noticed when I was looking at things very close up in detail. The gameplay of the game is your standard RPG type game, where you level up as you advance in the story and gain new abilities and such. You learn more about each character and the situations that they're in, and as the story progresses, you go to each character's hometown and have to juggle with doing tasks set for you, while also doing side quests, fighting monsters, and all the other usual RPG type stuff that you would expect to find. There are various mini-games in the game, such as fishing, which I can only really explain by comparing it to Persona 4's fishing minigame, where you would hunt for various fish to gain points and earn new stuff from one of the other characters in the game. There is also a card-style type game, which is a little bit like Final Fantasy VIII's card game, only it isn't forced down your throat like how Final Fantasy VIII's card game was, in order for you to complete and get new stuff. The card game in Cold Steel is more of an enjoyable experience, which you play in order to raise link points with each character that you end up playing with. The more times you play, the more times you get more linkage with the characters. Either if you win or you lose, it doesn't matter. The point is, the more times you play, the more linkage points you get. The more linkage points you get, the more abilities you get with each individual character. So, it's a good reason to play the game. The battle system for the game is very good, with your standard attack option, the ability to move where you want to go on the battlefield, and such and forth. There's also special moves available to you, such as magic attacks, think Final Fantasy VII, and then there's your limit break-esque style attack, which deals a huge amount of damage. If you gain enough link points with the other characters, you can also do combo attacks and perform certain abilities if paired with each other character, such as if your character dies, your other character who you are linked with will auto-resurrect you. It's a little bit like the Chrono Trigger type pairing. However, a lot of the time I found most of my characters didn't use this. Like for example, if one of my characters was hurt, the other character is meant to automatically use Auto Tear, which would be a heal, but a lot of the time they never really did this. So I kind of just ended up feeling, well, I put a lot of effort into doing this and the characters aren't doing it all the time. I don't expect them to do it all the time, but during my gameplay they didn't do it as often as I thought they would, and so far I've put about 120 hours into the game, and I think I've only seen one of my characters use the auto abilities 12 or 13 times, if that. The environment of the world of Cold Steel is very well done, and I did feel like the places I visited during the game were all separate places and each one was different from the other. The Nord Highlands, for example, are very different to Legram, and even though you only go to each place once during the game, it's still very well done. What I mean by this is, in each chapter you go to location A or city A, and once that chapter is done, you don't visit there again. Once each chapter is done, you return back to Ford's military school. Which, if I have to be honest, I ended up hating in the end, because the usual routine at Ford's military school would be you walk around doing various quests at the school, you talk to everyone to find the hidden quest, and then once that's done the day's usually over, and you either have to do it all again at night or the very next day. Now this might not sound like such a big deal, but when you're doing it almost every day during the course of the game and running around school inside and out, then running to and from the local town, yeah, it gets rather tedious quite fast. At least when you're in a new location, it's a little less tedious, but you're constantly having to do it at For's Military Academy, that in the end I just started getting on my nerves. That aside, I did like the new locations that you go to during the game. I like the market town that you visit during the start of the game, I like the castle you visit in Legram, and generally I liked all the other places I visited. Well, aside from the open plains of Nord Highlands. Remember when you played Final Fantasy X and you reached that location where it's like an open world? Well, you had that huge area to run around in, yeah? Well, this is like that, only you can ride a horse. And this open plain is huge. Very huge. Which gets really annoying fast, because you go to a town on one side of the map, and then a person from there will give you a quest, which is all the way on the other side of the map. And it won't let you fast travel. So you go back and forth a lot. Thankfully the PC version has a turbo mode option, which I ended up having to use quite a fair bit in this open plain land. All in all, I did like the environment and the world that Cold Steel gives you. I just wish that when the developers were making the game, they didn't make it so that when you were in For's Military Academy, it was just essentially running back and forth asking everyone questions and trying to find hidden quests, and then back and forth going into the town, and then back and forth going to Military Academy, and then doing it constantly the next day and the day after that. But aside from that, I really did like all the other locations that you go to in the game. So, should you buy Trials of Cold Steel? If you can get the game for a decent price, then yes. I managed to get the game fairly cheap because it was on sale, and also because I had a voucher I hadn't used from ages ago. It's a great game, with an enjoyable battle system and characters you can like pretty much straight away. With it being an anime game, however, there are the usual tropes thrown in here and there, but to be honest, I kind of expect that with most anime style games. If you are an anime fan, then this game will really be to your liking, with the graphics and the humour, and with the game's story going between what's happening in the world and dealing with the mystery resolving around the old schoolhouse. The only downside to the game really is the fact that it's very politic driven at times. I don't mean like Star Wars: A Phantom Menace forced, politically driven, but at points it's nearly as bad. The game also doesn't have a lot of actual English voice acting in it. It has a fair amount, and I am grateful for the actual English dub in the game, but sometimes it's rather odd. How can I explain this? It won't have any voice acting at all, and instead you're reading what characters are saying, then person Y shows up, and for some odd reason that character will say something like, It's nice to meet you all again. And it's actually voiced by the voice actor. But then everything else after is written and not spoken, which seems rather strange because for the last 10 or 12 minutes of the game, everything would have been written and then a random person says hello or something along those lines, and it's voiced, but it's just that part. Everything else they say afterwards is written, which is just a rather random thing to do. It's almost as if each voice actor had a budget of a certain amount of words they were allowed to voice for X amount of money and not a penny more. I have already mentioned the constant running about that the game makes you do, which at times does feel as if it's being forced to flesh out the game's length a little. That being said, I do currently have about 120 hours in the game itself, and I have enjoyed it. I will be purchasing a second game when it's on sale, and when I get around to finishing other games I'm currently playing or in the process of starting. It's a great game, and if you can get it for a good price on Steam or anywhere else, it's a win-win.